All right, Vanessa, thank you so much as you get your tea together for joining me for our conversation. How are you?
Oh, today I'm doing really good, actually.
Glad to hear.
Really, really happy. Thank you for being flexible with me on the recording time.
No problem. And I first just an easy question to jump. Not that any of these questions are difficult, but um, can you just start by telling us what is science with impact?
Yes, but first, Jeff, I need to ask you, how are
Yeah.
you doing?
Oh, thank you. I'm doing well.
Of
I
course.
am. Where are we? What is it? Wednesday? It's been a productive Wednesday as we record this. I'm in Rochester, New York, so the weather's starting to turn a little bit. It's gray outside and chilly, but I like the start of fall. All the good, all the best. Well, football's in fall. I love watching football, and then the best. I feel like the best foods, the best clothing. It all comes in the fall. Like I love like food you eat when it's cold outside, the soups, the chili. Anyway, it's I'm good. I'm good.
So you're down for the cozy vibes of
Yeah,
fall,
exactly.
is what I'm hearing. I love that. That's wonderful. We don't sports ball too hard at our house. Not that that's an issue for anybody else to do. It's just not our thing. We like
Sure.
to like play outside, and whenever I see someone playing a sport on the TV, I just want to go do it. It drives me crazy sitting there like I can't affect the play.
I find myself,
I'm
yeah,
selfish.
especially like when my team is like I'm watch mainly NFL football, and so when I've waited all week for my team to play, and then they go out and they are playing poorly, and I'm still sitting in the house after like 2 hours. I'm like, why am I doing this? It's beautiful outside. Why am I putting myself through this?
Right? Absolutely, I get that. Who's your team?
Washington Commanders. I was born in the DC area, so in Maryland, but where I'm from in Maryland is all DC growing up. So I'm a DC sports fan.
Very cool. I would say like go Commanders and then like back you up with a team that I support, but there's
There's
none. So
nothing.
like yay, Commanders.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, of
You got
course.
one new fan today, maybe.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, so to answer your question, what is science with impact? So, science with impact is a mission. It's a mission to connect society and research advancement. That's putting it super simply. But basically, I got to enjoy science as a safe space when I was a kid. It was a place where I could discover and imagine and doodle, and I found that very like one of the only real sources of peace that I had at the time. And so science has just been this incredible refuge for me in my brain. And my goal is just to invite as many people into that space as possible, because one aspect that was challenging was envisioning myself as a scientist. That came with all kinds of like societal and self barriers that I had to overcome. And I would love to be able to just give people lots of opportunities to like listen to, connected to, and envision themselves as scientists. And with that, I'm hoping that it allows more and more people to have that safe space and to envision themselves.
Awesome. And we'll talk more about your organization in a minute.
Sure.
First, so you mentioned um, being interested in science. It sounds like at an early age.
Hmm.
Um, can you talk about sort of what then, I guess, solidified the fact that you were going to go into that field? Was there a moment, or was it just like over time the interest grew?
In one word, it was spite. But I'll unpack that. I fell in love with science originally through books and the library. And I had this class assignment where we were kind of competing against each other to see who could read the most pages. And me being the pragmatic little bean that I was, I thought, oh, these Nature of Science magazines have really huge pictures, so I can burn through some pages and then beat my colleagues or my little peers who were reading these chapter books. To their credit, they were actually like reading, Whereas I was reading, but just there's pictures everywhere. And so I won. And it was totally on a technicality that I just read through a lot of those National Geographic science magazines. But I found that as I was reading through all these facts about animals and about how they, function in the world, their evolutionary adaptations, and the science behind some of the unique things that they can do, I found myself completely fascinated, and I kept reading beyond that random assignment that I sort of cheated on. And so I started just voraciously consuming whatever science content I could find. And at the time, that was a lot of those magazines. There was two shows. There was Jeff Corwin and Steve Irwin, who were biologists who went out in the field and introduced us to these animals in their habitat, which I found fascinating. And so I did all of that. Eventually, my grandmother noticed that I had such a passion for science and animals. And we were in a situation where we were living in Tampa, Florida, and childcare was too expensive for my family. So she had a brilliant idea to find a way to drop me off at the Museum of Science of Industry every day throughout the summer, and then let that be my childcare. So it wasn't exactly on the up and up, but I found a way we paid for my ticket for the summer, so that was, ethical. And then it said in there that you had to be like with family. And so what I would do is I would just say bye to grandma, go inside, and then occasionally flit around with someone else's family that kind of looked like me. And then I would break off to go to the library or break off to go to the huge IMAX theater. It was just incredible. What a cool way to spend childcare. And there were cameras everywhere, so we felt pretty safe with me being completely unsupervised for like 8 hours in this museum. And I loved it because I am deeply introverted. So if you give me a whole day where all I have to do is learn science and read books and play with the gift shop toys, which they very kindly let me do without having to pay for them, it was just the best. So that solidified it. But what really sent me over the edge was in middle school, I had such a profound connection to science that I had already started telling everyone I'm going to become a DNA recombinant technologist because I read about it in a magazine and they take genes from different animals and give them new capabilities. And I just thought that was the dopest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And I had one teacher who looked at me and told me, "You won't do that." And I asked them why. And they said, "Because you're a Hispanic girl. You're not going to ever do that. You'll probably be pregnant at 15 and that will be your future. So maybe you should just leverage the fact that you're pretty and figure out who you can marry that will have money. And then they can fund this special interest you have in science and that'll be your future." And I remember just being a little pissed.
Did you punch them?
More pissed than anything. No. I was a middle schooler. I had not quite acquired a taste for violence just yet. And so I was more just shocked that had happened and hurt. Hurt that they would say that to me. And I had a few other people in my life who were saying similar things, that family mattered more and that I shouldn't focus on a career, especially in science, where it'll take me away from the family. It was a friction point culturally and societally. And so out of spite, I just decided to do it anyway because it made me happy.
Good for you.
Thanks.
And thanks for the tips on how to maybe one day get free childcare out of a museum. Good to know.
Yeah. Now just be careful because I think you can get arrested for that nowadays.
Yeah, it's probably, I know. They probably have
it's a different time.
More of a sense of what's happening. Yeah. So in preparing for this, I saw an article you did for a publication called Chemical and Engineering News. Mm-hmm. And that kind of solidified now I have to reach out to her to talk because I just love the way you kind of envisioned your career and the way you talked about it. I think you mentioned that you needed a lot of evidence before putting all your hopes into one thing. How did that mindset influence the career choices you made after you got your PhD?
Sometimes trust issues can be very helpful. Essentially, you know, that passion for science, that being my safe space and my surroundings and all of the things I experienced, cultivated into a human being who struggles to trust fully in anything. And it takes me a long time to make decisions, to make connections, to trust. It takes me a lot of evidence, a lot of someone showing me instead of saying things. And I prefer to break things down into my life to observational quantities, which is helpful as a scientist, but sometimes not helpful as a human. Like when people describe someone as confident, my first question is always like, what does that look like? You know, I don't like it when things are described as other feelings. Like, oh, they're confident, so they're happy and they're, smart. And like, what are those other, like, what does that look like? Like, give me concrete things that I can observe. And so, yeah, pursuing life in that way means that I need a lot of evidence before I make a choice. And as I was navigating my career as a scientist, that of course, that goal to be more objective is very helpful at times. And I was looking at the evidence from my career, noticing that, just to give a few examples, after I had finished my bachelor's in science, I was looking at the different career options. And one career option that was instilled in me young, I'm a first generation American. My family sacrificed everything to move here from Cuba. And it was really important to me to honor that sacrifice with being everything I could be. And so as a young person who loved science, of course, that was steered into like, you should be a doctor. And so I was like, okay. So my bachelor's major when I first enrolled was in biomedical sciences with the intention to become a doctor. But knowing myself and knowing that I need evidence before I commit what could be 20, 40 years of a career and hundreds of thousands of dollars in resources and opportunity cost, I needed evidence that I would be well suited for this career. So in that spirit, I decided to get a job, an entry-level position at a hospital, just to see if it would be a space that I would want to work in. I got very fortunate in getting a position as a scribe. If you're not familiar with that role, it's the person who rolls a computer around and annotates everything for the doctor. So that's like what medications the person's on, what are they presenting with in terms of symptoms, what was the, diagnosis, what conclusions, what medications were prescribed, where's their pharmacy, those sorts of things. I noted all of that in the patient's chart for the doctor so that they could focus on seeing the patient. And in those experiences, I learned a lot of things about working in a hospital environment that were not well suited to me. So within 6 months of working that role, I realized I don't want to go to medical school. That career is not well suited to me. So now I needed to collect evidence for other career choices. So that's just one example. You mentioned the article in reference to those perspectives and that information that I was collecting. I was trying to decide, where do I want my career to go as a scientist? Do I want to become a professor? Do I want to become an industrial scientist? Do I want to work for a nonprofit? Do I want to do government? Or do I want to do entrepreneurship? I'm sure there's many other opportunities out there. Those are the 5 that I was really considering. I settled on entrepreneurship, I think the way most people do, out of complete and utter need and desperation. And so, yeah, but that was the only evidence I needed, was that, oh gosh, we got to get food on the table immediately. And the other avenues for me at the time were harder to generate the revenue we needed to put food on the table than just starting my own company.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that the role family and personal circumstances play in that decision making. I know I don't want to speak for a lot of trainees, but I know like it's, when you think of a career path, it's a lot of things come into play there. And family is a big part of that. Any kind of advice you would give to trainees that might be facing similar crossroads and thinking like, well, this is, here's my career potential, or here's the things that I think I could do, but Um, there's this family aspect impacting me. How is there, what is there to think about there, or any advice?
Yeah, the two things that immediately come to mind are do what's best for you, and you only need to figure out your next step. I'll explain those two
Mm-hmm.
if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Doing what's best for you. It sounds simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. I think whether we're cognizant of it or not, all of us live our lives according to the opinions of others. We have judgments about what careers are worth value and what aren't, and we have judgments about ourselves and what we're able to do and who we are in the world, and almost all of that is shaped by those who are around us and what we hear and see. You know, there might be all of that information around you about what you're capable of from the eyes of other people and what careers are worth value, but I would highly encourage you to listen to this very quiet kind of inner voice that I think a lot of us have that is gently trying to guide you to what's best for you. For me, making the decision to not become a doctor was very hard. I didn't want to let my family down. I felt like I was letting generations of my family down by making the choice to do another version of science, which is still a great career choice. And then when I decided I wanted to become a teacher, wow, was I a disappointment, because it was just like, you're never going to make money doing that. Your life is going to be so hard, and that's not what we wanted for you. We're afraid for you. But it came across as we don't value that career and we think you're less than. So it was very hard making that choice. But I kept hearing this calling of every time I did a little outreach thing, or I got to help a classmate study, or I would take it upon myself to organize study groups and lead them. And just something about teaching and helping other people understand things that are complicated that really just filled my spirit. And it made me feel like I was bigger than just me. Like I could help people in a way that's unique to what gifts that I've been given. And even if it didn't make other people happy, it made me happy. And it took some time to listen to that voice. So do what's best for you if you can. If you're at that place in your journey where you have the capacity and the ability to listen to your own voice and put that above basically everybody else's, except for maybe like your deity of choice, please consider doing that. So that's the first one. Let me know if you want me to do the second one or if you want to follow up on that
Well,
first.
no, I'm glad you met. It's interesting that I've heard, in other industries, like even in just in general, of like when people are giving advice on building a business or just of some sort, it's like, and people are trying to figure out what that thing is that they're good at and can talk about or just be the expert in. And it's, I've heard the advice, like, there's always that voice in your head that there's something pulling you towards, there's a voice pulling you towards something. And you'll know it when you hear it, and just go towards that. And so, that comes up, it sounds like too, and a lot of different career paths. So, okay, go ahead. Second one.
No, that's okay. It's a great insight. The next one is just my colleague, Paul Ferranbi, taught me this in a podcast, oddly enough. So the way he taught this to me is just letting me, I was venting basically about this project that I was planning for. And if you're a neurotic person like me, when you plan a project, at least I used to, try to plan it to the fullest extent, where I would break it down, what is the big objective? These are each of the milestones that let me know I'm on pace to hit that objective, that I'm at least like directionally correct. And these are all the projects in each milestone, and these are all the tasks in each project, and this is the deadline for each task. And oh my gosh, let's set out this beautiful plan. And now that I have AI, I can just like really like mentally procrastinate by planning, like procrastination all the way through a project by just adding more and more nuance and detail. And it's almost always the case that none of those plans or deadlines work out. none of those objectives get met in the order that I thought. New objectives come in and new skills need to be learned and new people need to be brought in and collaborated with. It's often when I start, especially these long-term projects that we do in science, often where I start and where I think I'm going to end are just like nowhere near reality. And so what Paul taught me is, he just gently listened to me vent and shared, I've learned for me that if I try to plan out the next 10 steps, I just get overwhelmed with how far I'm going. I just want to figure out what is my next immediate step. And that was very transformative for me, just listening to someone think of it that way, where of like, oh, I don't need to figure out everything out. I just need to figure out what is the next step. If you have kids and they watched Frozen 2 1,000 times, you might relate to like Anna being in this cave after she thinks her sister has gotten harmed. I'm trying not to do spoilers. And she's sitting there just feeling devastated and thinking like, just do the next right thing. And so I would just add like, just do the next right thing for you. The next thing that makes you feel like you're happy and living in accordance with what good means for you. And you just need to figure out the one next step. It doesn't need to be this whole crazy plan because the plan's probably not going to work.
Yes. That's so funny. I was talking to one of our faculty at my full-time work is at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry in Rochester, New York. And I was talking to a faculty member yesterday in prep for a podcast interview that I do for the school. But, and she's given some career talks and she had a similar story. Like when she first started school and going toward graduate school, she had it in her mind to research and help cure neurodegenerative diseases specifically. But, as time went on, due to certain circumstances, and I may get some of the details off, but her PhD advisor left and she was sort of adopted by another advisor, and that changed her research. And then she actually ended up enjoying that work. And eventually, when things came together and she saw her work being cited in other people's presentations, she was physically in person for a presentation, not knowing that her research was going to be cited in the presentation, and it made her cry. And so her point is like, do research that makes you cry. So, follow whatever makes you cry to happy tears, if that's helpful at all. But
oh, I love that so much, and I'm so happy for her. I've had a similar experience, and I can tell you, it's just like it's an out-of-body experience where you're like, wow, what I do matters.
There you go.
And like dreaming so big that dream that you have brings you to tears. Definitely chase that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of failure along the way, especially in this, in researching, right?
In life, yeah.
In life. So what did the start of Science with Impact look like?
I had it pretty easy, honestly. Yeah, and I'm not even saying that facetiously, like genuinely, now that I understand a little bit more about what it entails to run a business, I had probably the gentlest landing pad for it, and I highly recommend other people take this approach if they can in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it sounds nice.
Right? Like step one, maybe don't start with a widget or like a physical product that you're selling that you have to design and patent, and wow, what a road that is. I'm grateful that that's not where I started in entrepreneurship. I started in consulting. A service industry role like consulting is great in terms of you're able to learn things like marketing, networking, collaboration, communication, balancing out budgets for business, not just for yourself, but like for businesses. The infrastructure of a business, leadership. There's just so many things that you can learn through consulting. And what's nice about consulting is that the overhead, meaning all the expenses that you have to pay to have your business, are so low these days. With like a nice little $100 registration that you maintain with $50 a year with your state government and the federal government, you can start a business. Just like that, you have an LLC. Once you have your LLC, you get an EIN, which is like your social security, but for your business. You can use that to sign up for a business bank account, through a whole number of apps. I have my favorite, but you can do a whole bunch of apps. Um, Once you have your business bank account, you can start receiving invoices to that account and then paying yourself a reasonable salary. If you want to establish an S Corp, it's a type of corporation that allows you to pay yourself so that you have a W-2 salary still, which is really nice for tax purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And now you are your own employee. If you are not quite making like 60K in revenue it's 2025, like around there, then you can just work as a self-employed entity and just have invoices go straight to you, and that's okay too. And then you don't even need to do the LLC and the business bank account. Like doing the consulting, the overhead is essentially like, can you create a website, which you can create for free on so many different platforms, and can you market?
Yeah.
That's your overhead cost, and your time, of course. And so like you don't need to have an office space. You don't need to have a warehouse. You don't need to have a patent. You barely need any legal. I mean, I'd highly recommend doing at least the bare minimum there and talking to a friend of yours who does legal work, or a professional. But, you need a little bit of legal, a little bit of IT. A phone can basically take care of most of it. I highly recommend consulting as your first exploration into the world of entrepreneurship. And yeah, going back to your question though about how did Science with Impact start? So essentially, I was starting with my bachelor's, right? I started teaching science, fell in love with science. This is going to be the abbreviated version of my whole life story. Then I got a master's degree because I was bedridden after a pregnancy. And I decided I wanted to make that time productive because I can't just relax. And so I decided to do a master's degree. And then I was able to teach at a community college, which I loved. I liked working with that like slightly older adult population instead of like the high school age where I was working. And then I got passed up for a job opportunity at the community college because I didn't have a PhD, which was totally valid. But again, spite was like, I will get this PhD. So got the PhD. I went from teacher to researcher. Then I did my postdoc and went to administrator. And as I worked through these different aspects of academia, I realized that I wanted to have as much impact as possible, but I wasn't sure how still. I tried as a teacher, I tried as a researcher, I tried it as an administrator. I wasn't sure how to do this. Then I was undergoing a huge personal transformation that resulted in me wanting to divorce the partner I was currently with. And that meant, since we were living in another state, to do the administrative job that I'd been hired to do, I'd have to relocate to another coast. And after uprooting my young children over and over and over for my career, I just didn't have the heart to do that anymore. So I had 6 weeks, because that was the amount of runway that thankfully my administratorship gave me. I had 6 weeks to find income, and I had to do it in a confined geographic space because I didn't want to uproot my kids. So I was like, okay, so 6 weeks finding a role in academia. Good luck, right? And then 6 weeks basically finding any kind of role. It really takes about like 6 months to land a decent job these days, if not longer. 6 months, I would say, is probably closer to the minimum. And so I was like, no, I need to create income like right now. So I sent out a desperate tweet, basically just being like, hey, these are my skill sets. This is what I've done in my career. If you need any support at all, I need the income. Please help. Please send help. And I will support you in return in like writing manuscripts and doing your data visualizations and, doing like multi-model analyses and statistics. And like, these are my skill sets. How can I help you? And through that desperate tweet, I landed 3 clients who are still my clients today and renew. And my biggest client, Monet, and this is why I say I had it so easy. My largest client, they basically needed a full-time person. But since I couldn't uproot my children to go to North Carolina, where their center's located, they figured out that as long as I had an LLC, they could hire me as a consultant And all of the income they were planning and all the benefits they were planning for me, they could instead translate that into a retainer fee. Um, and so I've had that client since I started with my Science with Impact business, and we're going on our fourth year. Um, and so their contract alone can cover almost all of my personal expenses and business expenses. So having that one client baked in for so long, and making sure they're happy and doing a good job for them has led the way for this whole business to even exist.
I love that. And is it, well, I guess first, what skills from your academic training do you think have transferred most directly into, what you're doing now with Science with Impact? Aside from like
In
the fact that you're
short, like,
still working in science.
yeah, the most valuable skills, I mean, having a background in research
Yeah.
is of course helpful, especially science research when you're talking to other science researchers. The fact that I have my doctorate has allowed me to immediately go past the more managerial positions into director level roles. Um, just having that credential is a big part of that. Having a background in science education research, particularly discipline based education research, which means like chemistry education research for me, having that specific background, particularly in assessment design, evaluation, um, critical system evaluation, and manuscript writing, statistics and evaluation, like all of those skill sets happen to be kind of perfect to support any research scientist in communicating the impacts of their work. Um, what helped me the most, though, I would say, like beyond all those things, right, is that I did this sort of thing that I call now like STEM plus, where you have your STEM expertise, right? And you add something else, like add a little spice kind of thing. And my little spice was a passion for visualization. Um, I struggle I struggle a lot, but I struggle to understand things often. And so beautiful, simple visualizations, whether they're like data visualizations, illustrations, or like now lately 3D animation, it really helps me understand. The process of creating it and viewing it afterwards really helps me connect to what I'm doing. So that innate passion that I've had since I was young, pairing that with STEM, that's what's made our company, Science with Impact, unique, because I'm able to take a data set, I can evaluate it, I can report out the results in a way that's ready for a manuscript or ready for a social media post, and I can create a beautiful visual to go with it that will help people resonate with what the message is trying to communicate. And I can't think of a more useful skill for trying to broaden the societal impact of STEM research.
Yeah. And one more thing on the whole diversifying career portfolio thing
Yeah.
and eggs in baskets. So I've, again, I've hear this a lot in the marketing space. There are people out there that, are referred to as content entrepreneurs. Like they build their businesses around creating content, whether it's a newsletter that they get sponsored or they write books. And so this concept comes up a lot there where it's, and just the, I think more and more, especially in our current just state of affairs, and whether it's politics or whatever, job stability is that, one job stability is not enough for some people, or just doesn't, it's not secure enough. So having that, like, you mentioned a diversified portfolio of clients, partners, income streams, what does that look like for you in your own work today?
Yeah. So, in terms of like eggs and baskets and the future of science and career navigation, I mean, all of these topics are big topics. I'll just share with you some patterns I'm recognizing in the field that I've found useful for navigating these choices myself. If you think back to the era through which like elder generations, like our parents or grandparents, were raised, I would say a lot of the business infrastructure was localized. If we're going really far back, we're thinking about like you can't really take a plane or a car anywhere, and you have a local market that you serve and you fill a specific role for that community. And as time went on, those roles became more like industrialized, more factory oriented. Now you are able to drive, but a lot of the time you would find your role in society, your employer, and try and serve that role for as long as you could so that you could earn things that were called a pension. For those of us who are like younger than 30, that's this magical thing where you'd work for a company for a long time and then they would agree contractually to pay you even after you're done working with them after a certain number of years. These sorts of opportunities are rare now, and I have a theory as to why. With the democratization of business, media, industry as a whole, where more and more increasingly you can become your own media channel through platforms like YouTube, or your own publisher through platforms like Substack, your own marketer through social media platforms, your own entrepreneur, as you know, now it's easier than ever to register to create a company. I think that now that these processes have become democratized, having that loyalty arrangement isn't mutually beneficial anymore. It's not particularly beneficial for the employee or the employer to make these long-term commitments for staying in one place for a really long time. So instead, now that we have this more democratized open system, the types of entrepreneurs that I'm seeing who are really thriving are these like content entrepreneurs, like you've described them. But the most successful ones that I've seen pair their content creation with their company's mission. So for example, Alex and Layla Hermosi are very notable content creators in the realm of like, how do you build and scale a business? And right next to that content creation, they have acquisition.com, which is their company where they help acquire companies and scale them. So doesn't that make sense that those two rows are parallel? Ali Abdal is another wonderful example. His content creation has to do with productivity, and along with his content creation, he has a business around helping people become more productive. Mel Robbins is another example. She has a podcast. Her content creation is all about motivational speaking, leadership, learning more and growing as a human being. And so she gives talks all over the country, and that's her company. So she's pairing, all of these people are pairing a viable business model with content creation, and that's where we're seeing a lot of success. What I love about that approach is that you're using a democratized content system like a YouTube or podcast or whatever you have, and the capacity to no longer report to a single employer, but instead you are the business entity who can now connect with a multitude of clients. What I see for the future of science, at least I have been living this reality, where instead of becoming affiliated with a single institution and living out my career with that institution, which is totally valid, by the way, instead of doing that, I've taken a different route where now I am an entity, my own entity, my company is its own entity, and all of these institutions collaborate with me and my company and my team. So now I don't belong to any one institution, but I'm able to move freely through different institutions, all while keeping my home base where I want it to be. So like geographically, I can live where I want to. And applications like Zoom and the internet allow us to do that sort of thing. So I envision a future where all of us have the opportunity to democratize our own employment, where we are our own employers and we sub out our time or intellectual property to different entities. And we create this beautiful like spider web of interconnected networks of resources and information, and we help each other. So that's what I think the future of STEM might become, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and you mentioned each of the folks you mentioned with their content um, and their businesses made me think then, of course, about your podcast. So you are regularly pushing out the Science with Impact podcast. Do you kind of view that in a similar way as you were describing some of these other folks?
I do. I've done a poor job of connecting my content creation to the revenue model of my business, mostly because I've been very focused on the mission
Mm.
more than the model, where how can not a lot of scientists get accolades or support or rewards for engaging in the broader societal impact of their research. So highlighting them and celebrating their work and having conversations around how we can do this better. I know we're going to have you on the podcast in a couple days, and
Yes.
I'm so excited for that. Like thinking about how we can all support each other to amplify our impact in society. I was focused on that, and I will remain focused on that mission,
Hmm.
but I need to do a better job of integrating the business model because I'll tell you, doing that podcast cost me about $30,000 per year, and like 10 to 15 hours of my life every week. And so, if it is not sustained by the business model, it cannot be sustained. So I need to figure out how to do that better. And it's hard because as a scientist, I just want to do the good work.
Yeah.
Having the two serve each other, the mission and the model, is really important. And so I'm still working out exactly how to do that.
Yeah. Well, just want to ask a couple more things. I just have
Sure.
a few minutes here before I have
No
to go pick up my
problem.
son, and
Yeah.
I do want to.
I can relate.
I I talked to um, an alum the other day for our my higher ed podcast that mentioned, throughout her PhD training and just traditionally, communication is not part of the training. There's the model that those doing research, they do the work and they publish it in a journal that has a paywall, and then that was it. Like that was the culmination of the work. But obviously now it's so much more important and impactful to get it in front of the public and those who really need to hear it. Um, should Do you think trainees today should be trained, not only as researchers but communicators, advocates, even entrepreneurs? Is it like should that training be worked into graduate education somehow?
1,000%. And I'll say that I think graduate education does a really great job of preparing people for a career in academia.
Mm-hmm.
In academia, you often need to communicate your research and methodologies to other researchers. And that's what journal articles do a great job of. Once you are done being a student in academia, that is when you start to realize how important, or at least, the implications of it start to directly affect you, of communicating to funders like the National Science Foundation or the National Health Institute and to the broader public. It's once you are done with your education and you are now a practicing scientist that the consequences of not knowing those skills really come to roost. And so while graduate education is really great at preparing people for the researcher to researcher communication, I think if you have a student right now, one of the best things you can do, one of the best gifts you can give them is to include them in your grant writing and to work together on connecting your science to society. Like they know better than you how to use social media platforms to communicate messages that are relatable and authentic. I will venture to say 9 times out of 10, your student will know that better than you will. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for mutual collaborations that can be fruitful for everyone involved. I'd highly recommend getting your students regularly involved, making it a part of like every time we have a group meeting, let's create a piece of content together. Every time we have a new finding, let's share it on LinkedIn. Every time that we, decide to publish a paper, let's not just share out the DOI link in the abstract. Let's actually be thoughtful on let's create a campaign around like each figure, and let's create some new visuals that are even simpler than the technical manual guide that we have written through our journal article. Let's reach out to the people who funded this work and let them know with a very simple, beautiful image and a headline and like half a page of text of what their investment in this project has resulted in, so that they can feel good about continuing to fund these types of works. Beyond conferences and papers and patents, what else can we do to communicate regularly? And it doesn't need to be these huge undertakings. I wouldn't even say it needs to be a course. I think it should just become a regular practice, a regular norm in the lab to find ways to communicate what you're doing with everyday people.
I love that. And the last thing, if we are in, I feel like we hear this a lot, uncertain time. But it's just, it seems like science is under a lot of scrutiny with the funding cuts and the lack of trust. And it's a tough time, I'm sure, to be a graduate student. And,
Yeah.
If you had a message for those who are maybe a little anxious about the uncertainty of their future, if you had a message or advice for them, what would it be?
Oof.
I know.
So many things, probably the first question I would have is, under what pretenses have you experienced certain times?
Mm-hmm.
For me, there has never really been a time that was certain. But if you have experienced that and you're mourning that, that's valid and totally reasonable to mourn that. I would say get comfortable with the uncertainty as fast as you can, because it's not really within your control to make society more certain and easier to navigate. All you can do is your immediate sphere of influence, and if you can put all your attention and love and energy into that, I think you'll be a happier person. The other thing is, those two things that we talked about earlier, I'll just harken back to that, of like, do what's right for you. Nobody will understand your vision for your career like you do. Nobody will understand your talents and your unique gifts the way you do. So whatever voices you're hearing about like, oh, it's unstable to start a business, or, oh, that's going to be so hard, you shouldn't even try. If that person hasn't done exactly what you want to do, then I would recommend following your voice, because what the hell do they know? Honestly, like, what do any of us know? Like, I might guide my children and be like, hey, you shouldn't run out in the street, because I have experience that sucks. Right? But in terms of like, if they wanted to become trapeze artists and I was like, oh, the market for trapeze artists isn't, like, what do I know about that? I have no experience in the circus arts. I have no idea. Maybe trapeze artists are going to be the bombest career in 2040. I have no idea. So like, listen to people who have achieved what you have achieved and have your best interest in mind. If they don't have those two qualifications, feel free to ignore them. Even if they're your mom, coming from a mom, feel free to ignore them. If she doesn't have your best interest in mind and experience doing exactly what you want to do, bumblebee tuna. Like, just like, thanks for the advice, but I'm going to keep doing what's right for me. And just figure out your next step. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to create a 10-year plan. Like, anybody who's ever created a 10-year plan will tell you it's a joke. Like, you'll get 2 years into that plan and be like, wait, what was I even thinking?
I might end this podcast episode where you said, what the hell did they know? I think
Yeah.
that would be a
the
great
hell did they know?
cutoff point.
Yeah.
That'll be the
Yeah,
title.
throw away your 10-year plan.
Yeah.
You don't need a plan.
That I think will be the title, or at least the thumbnail of this episode. What the hell do they know?
Love it.
Well, thank you, Vanessa, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll link to all of your website and your socials in the description, and really appreciate it. I think trainees and others thinking about a path in science, have some really great, like, practical takeaways from this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Feel free to link my LinkedIn for people and encourage them to, I encourage you, reach out to me. It's okay to send me a message or a connection request to improve your network or grow your capacity to do something, or make an ask of me. That's fine. If you were asking me to do work for you, just know my going rate right now is 170 an hour.
Mm.
But if you want me to review an idea or your application materials for a program, just know that most of the time, if you ask nicely, I'll do it anyway, and I won't charge you.
I love it. I love this. I'm new to the science community, well, as of 4 or 5 years. Um, Everybody's so, it seems like, at least there are a lot of people out there that are willing to help, at least, and pay it forward is a message that always comes up, at least when I'm
Yeah.
speaking with alumni to those, going to the institution they attended. But there's that recurring theme of like paying it forward, which is great.